Right. Good to see you, Jito.
Good to see you too, and my sincere apologies once again. The wonders of working in an office such as mine. You get pulled at the last minute for other matters of urgency, but this is also very important. So I made sure I excused myself to make sure I availed myself to this. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, first of all, I think now we'll talk to the audience. So apologize for the delay and thank you for your patience, but it feels a bit like a rock concert when the rock pop star, lets his audience wait so that we can pump up the expectations. So with that, a true pleasure to start the second session of the webinar series BBW Paradigm Shift series, where we try and establish a platform for emerging and established leaders within the international financial architecture reform space to share their ideas, disruptive ideas by nature, we hope, for the international financial architecture. It's an extreme pleasure to introduce both illuminaries in the space. First of all, Jito Kayumba, who is, private advisor to the president of Zambia, and specifically as it regards to finance and investment. And he will be moderator or interviewed by a stellar member of BBW. He's an ambassador of the BBW community, William Hynes, who's senior climate economist at the World Bank. With that, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thanks, Frank, and thanks for all the inspirational work that you do on BBW, which I know is really important to many of us. Today, we're going to have the second in this series of paradigm shift discussions with BBW. And as someone who works in policy, my bosses in the past have always been very reluctant to talk about paradigms. And they say, but people are not interested in paradigms. That's an academic discussion. We just want to know how things will work better. But of course, they don't realize that they're actually operating within a paradigm itself. And they talk about essentially changing the objectives in the hope that the whole system will self-organize in a different way. So it's great to be able to talk to someone with what we call a definitive footprint in the international financial architecture reform space, and someone who's working very much within a system. And based on the sort of people who present here, I was reminded of the quote by George Bernard Shaw, that the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. So it's great to be able to talk to someone who is, I don't think, too unreasonable, Jito Kayumba. But to start, maybe it would be great to hear. And by the way, another thing that policymakers always say about paradigm is that we don't really have time. We have our day jobs. We can't rethink the whole system. So I think you've demonstrated that indeed there are constraints in trying to rethink it, that we have to look after the day job. But to start, it'd be great to hear a bit about you, about the job that you do, the inspiration that you draw on, and what really influences you in the agenda that you're proposing in Zambia.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to engage with you and the audience, and I appreciate the question. Well, a bit about me really is someone who, having been born and raised in Zambia, who was very fortunate to have been born to a family who could afford to take me to a decent school, to have 3 meals a day, speaking to an international audience coming out of countries that are largely developed. This is something that might even come off as of a surprise, or something that we take for granted. Because the fact is, there are many people in parts of the world, like where I'm from Zambia, where there's a lot of people living in poverty, where 3 decent meals a day is almost I wouldn't say an impossibility, but it's a very rare privilege to have. And I was one of the few people who had that privilege, and also had the privilege of having exposure to the world, having not only gone to an international school during my high school days, but also was able to study out in Canada. So I got to interact with people from many parts of the world. So I got to appreciate various cultures and how the world operates from various vantage points. That really aroused a sense of curiosity around how we can make countries like my own better, how we can eliminate poverty, how do we enhance everything from the quality of life of citizens, from a housing perspective, from a clean water perspective, nutrition, you name it, so people can have a dignified life. And that really is what drives me. From the time I was very young, I had a great deal of empathy, recognizing that as much as I could be driven to school by my father, I would always notice the kid who's my age, who's wearing tattered clothing, who's walking barefoot. That image always stuck with me, and that also informed the choices I made from a career perspective. I was fortunate to work within the private equity space because I saw finance really, or investment, as a platform in which one can unlock value through impact investment, creating jobs, jobs that are impactful, that have an influence on the social environment, the skills, and also being alive to the fact that we need a better living environment. So where we're not doing harm to the environment, and where there's better governance. Obviously, I'm talking about ESG. Beyond that, there's the aspect of having an interest in national affairs, in being part and parcel of an administration. And I was privileged to have been appointed by the President of the Republic of Zambia, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, to the role of Special Assistant to the President for Finance and Investment. And a lot of what my work encompasses is really aligning, essentially the vision carrier is the President. He sets the stage for the vision and how that's implemented. But mine is to really assist in ensuring that that cascades throughout the government system with every strategic sector, from energy to mining to agriculture to infrastructure, and how that unlocks the value that essentially enables him to fulfill his mandate to grow the economy. And the purpose of growing the economy is to ensure that naturally the living standards of citizens increase, that people have jobs, that we really take not only from the economic metrics are moving in a positive trajectory, from GDP growth to driving inflation down, to enhancing affordability, to ensuring that all the infrastructure associated with creating quality of life is in place and it's ideal. So part of my task is, through his office, is to engage investors, to engage the leaders within the cabinet, and to guide on matters that enable us to get this through. And it's been an extraordinary privilege the last 3 years that I've been in this role, since the time the president was elected, and I came in as part of his administration. And the fulfillment of a lot of what he set out to do is really in motion, including something that I know we'll talk about soon, and that is dealing with a very severe debt situation that needed to be resolved, and taking us to a situation where we have a fiscal position as a country that does get us to build the economy and be really sustainable. Thanks.
Great. Well, thanks so much for clearly outlining your vision on the economic and financial system and how it should work. And do you think that the system itself works to help you achieve your goals, or does it create barriers to achieving that broad set of goals that you mentioned?
So I would say there's two perspectives. There's a system that is within the country, and the system that's within the global framework, the global architecture, something that's commonly spoken about. I mean, since the time great leaders like the leader of Barbados, among others, really set on course, basically programs discussing how do we reform the global financial architecture to ensure that there's affordable access to capital, that the discriminatory practices that puts high premiums on capital for countries in the third world like ours, and then also makes it less, accessible, and all those factors and conditions, that those undoubtedly have to be resolved. I think we've reached a point where we've realized that the only way we can truly accelerate economic growth in parts of the world like ours is that we have to revisit how the global environment operates, the perception of risk, the manner in which it's classified, the manner in which even just systems in Africa are perceived. Because the fact is, we can't achieve, particularly from a democratic perspective. I'll tell you, I'll sneak in this point. Zambia is fortunate to be a proud democracy, one of few in Africa that really has maintained this legacy for a significant amount of time, where we've peacefully changed leaders on 7 occasions. We have the 7th president now, and of course it's been done democratically and peacefully. And peace is something we're very proud of, but you can't have a situation where in the midst of a system that we believe the world appreciates and upholds as being the ideal system, but where the citizens feel that the dividends that come out of being a democracy are not really coming through. So you start to see other ideas creeping in. So where you start to see in other parts of the continent where there's uprisings and military coups and so on, and where people are cheering that on because they think that perhaps that will deliver what they want to fulfill the economic and social impact. So I thought I should mention that really as a introduction to really discussing how I think things that we feel must change and where capital is sourced, how value is created within the economies such as Zambia, particularly where the significant amount of resources are extracted, the way contracts are structured, the way the Bretton Woods institutions are structured, and the way the finances are made available, especially in the context of the fact that the countries that bear the biggest brunt of climate change are countries like our own. So, and even though we're very minuscule in terms of contribution to what causes these changes, I mean, Zambia is going through the most devastating drought in its history, and that's compromised the ability to generate electricity. 85% of our power comes from a green source, hydro, which is something we're very proud of, but the vulnerability of that has been exposed because now we don't have any water to generate electricity, and that's impacted the economy in a big way. So interventions are necessary where we can draw on funds through the World Bank, we can have terms with the IMF that don't have the level of stringentness that really makes it very difficult for economic stimulus to ensure that we are able to produce results that does create economic growth. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for introducing this idea that Zambia really is at a critical crossroads.
Sure.
Yeah. You mentioned the blend of economic challenges, the debt, inflation, poverty, and the climate vulnerabilities, so the droughts, flooding, etc., and perhaps the reliance on agriculture, mining, and energy resources. But how do you see this playing out? How do you think Zambia is going to take advantage of the economic opportunities that a global green transition would offer? And how would you manage to adapt to climate change?
You know, the first thing I'll say is that I will speak from a position of bias. I have to put that across because the fact that I work within an administration with the president who and this is where the bias begins to show, who's doing a phenomenal job in addressing the challenges that are at play, even in the context of not having sufficient fiscal space to essentially intervene towards to satisfy the needs of those who are most impacted, the most vulnerable, because food production fell to a record low. The country requires about 3 million metric tons or so of maize in order to sustain itself, and a lot of the neighboring countries depend significantly on Zambia's maize. So there's an aggressive intervention there, even with limited fiscal space. Of course, we're grateful to international stakeholders and cooperating partners who've certainly come through. Of course, from an energy perspective, that's also been a significant impact, which has driven up inflation. It has impacted the currency because of imports of food, imports of power. So all of that now with the leadership that we have is that now we have there's an environment of confidence where international institutions are able to come through knowing that the aspect of credibility is very much in place. There's clarity of vision and in execution and ensuring that the country really is held together, because under various circumstances many countries would essentially rupture with uprisings and all sorts of social unrest, but this is something that's been certainly contained, and what we're seeing is a clarity of the vision and implementation towards not only mitigation on the impact of the drought, but also in a very methodical manner, engaging international institutions who have made capital available, and also the private sector who are investing in climate resilient agriculture, as well as climate agnostic energy. So to answer the question, really, we are turning a corner in a very positive way. Just recently, we had a briefing from the UK government talking about the Green Growth Compact. We have engagements with multiple partners across the world who are also aligned with our direction, our vision to really get through to a point where we have resilience, so that we can actually get to a point confidently that should there be any future climate calamity like a drought, that the impact on issue of food security as well as energy security would be minimal, because we would have had a significant amount of solar and other energy platforms that are not hydro dependent. And of course, with the stimulus, and this is the most exciting, set us on course towards phenomenal. Yeah, I just realized I may have I think my line may have gone off. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, yes, I can hear.
We can hear you now. Yeah. I think,
Oh,
yeah, there was
fantastic.
some interference, but I think you're back with us.
Yeah. Yeah, apologies for that. Yeah, so basically, I don't know at which point that I cut. Yeah.
It wasn't very long ago, just maybe a minute ago. So
Oh, fantastic.
please continue.
Okay, so sorry, but yeah. So this office does get pretty hectic. So there's a lot of different things that come through. So the point I was trying to make really is that the mining sector, we've seen it as being that key driver towards, transforming the economic fortunes of this country. If you just look at a few examples from around the world, countries like Norway, countries like Qatar, the UAE, and among others, who've got a natural resource that they were able to adequately extract to a certain quantum and be able to realize the value from it. And the proceeds from that went into economic diversification and really investment to really not only deal with matters of debt, but investments that really created a much more robust economic platform. And this is something that we're working on, and we're proud to boast that we've had a little over $12 billion. I mean, in a space of 3 years of this administration, there's been more investment within the mining sector than really since independence in 1964. So what that essentially means is that the growth curve that we're about to move into, which really can be quantified in a very clear and proven and evidence-based manner, is clear. The unlocking of production that takes the current roughly 700,000 metric tons to 3 million is very much there, which will attract tens of billions of dollars of new revenues that come into the economy, with a significant chunk going to the treasury. What that means from a resolving of debts means that we really will become a lot less reliant on cooperating partner support and other providers of debt. So for me, that's why I can speak with enormous confidence that we are turning a corner towards a direction of prosperity within the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, that's great. And Chatham House recently published a paper that was titled "Copper Can Save Zambia." What's your take on copper and the future of that?
First and foremost, they're absolutely right. It can and it will. And the beauty is, I mean, God forbid somebody could discover some new alloy or create some alternative to the impressive conductibility of copper. But the fact is, we are in a situation where the demand for copper, we see the demand curve really moving in a specific direction. The trajectory can only go up, given the desire for the decarbonization of the vehicle sector. So electric vehicles, the demand is significantly rising in Europe. We know there's more direction to essentially ensure that at a certain point in time, every vehicle in certain jurisdictions will be electric. China is going the same direction. The enhancement of, or even just, there's so much industrial use for it, and the demand is significant. I like what I hear Robert Freeland speaking about of Ivanhoe Mines. He speaks significantly of this, and his approach always seems to be proven. The times in which he's predicted the trajectory of the copper price, it always comes to pass. And we believe that from the average 9,000 or so metric tons, it'll go past 12,000. I think what that will mean from a revenue standpoint is phenomenal. And like Chatham House stated, it will certainly save Zambia. So I'm in complete agreement of that.
Great. Well, one thing you've made a distinction in the discussion so far has been national actions and then the international environment and how that supports
Yes.
your reform agenda.
Yes.
With some of the world's attention focused on COP, do you want to comment on how effective you see the COP process and then also climate finance and how successful Zambia is in accessing climate finance?
Zambia has not been successful in accessing climate finance, and it's been a huge source of frustration for us. We've done a lot. The president, first and foremost, upon coming into office, among the ministries he created the Ministry of Green Economy to ensure that there is a dedicated platform for engaging matters of climate and as well as how climate is associated with economic activity, ensuring that whether it be activities towards decarbonization, activities towards sustainability are all recognized, where we could unlock the aspects of the financial instruments associated with carbon credits, as well as climate finance that really mitigates the impact of climate change and so on. Given, I think, what I stated earlier around how that, just the unfairness of it, given the little contribution towards greenhouse gases that we have, and the relative impact is not fully aligned. So, with that being said, we've been quite present as a government at the highest level at every COP since the time the president took office. Our observation is that there's a lot more talk than action. And this is a great source of frustration. We came in with a lot of hope that a lot more climate finance would certainly be made available, where the frameworks are very clear around accessibility and deployment of this capital. But with the lack of availability or the actual deployment of it, it has resulted in a high degree of fatigue. Hence, frankly speaking, our not being present this year. But of course, the ministry is certainly represented there. We continue to engage. We need to still have a voice at the table to make sure that we are, well, I mean, of course, we maintain our hope that more will happen. And we do see that there is a great degree of clarity around frameworks associated with pricing of carbon credits and all these factors. But we do expect more. And we need to move beyond all the talk to actual deployment of capital.
And what about carbon markets? At the moment, it seems like there's a lot of countries that are positioning themselves to provide these types of credits, but on the demand side, maybe there's a lot less. So what will that mean? Do you see this as a reliable and predictable source of finance in the future?
It certainly would. I mean, there's a lot of financial instruments that have come into play. Debt for nature swaps is one. There's a lot of consideration on the part of some of the large global banking institutions like Goldman Sachs and Bank of America talking about being facilitators of transactions of that nature. But when it comes to the carbon markets, yet again, there's a lack of clarity on, what the value actually is when it comes to the tonnage and really what structures are put in place. There's a lot of intermediaries that essentially drive the process, but then you find later on that, well, perhaps they don't really articulate the real value because they're looking to gain a significant margin on our natural assets, if you will. I do believe that Zambia, like many countries on the continent, from forests to renewable energy platforms and areas where the aspects of environmental sustainability are very significant. We do suffer significantly from deforestation because of the energy shortage. So there's a lot of opportunity for interventions from a carbon credit perspective and how we can enhance the natural environment. So we've always been positioned. The issue is around the market dynamics. I think we have to have a framework that is a lot more transparent, where we have an appreciation, a transparent appreciation of, who are the purchasers, what's the pricing, what are the carbon assets, or what sort of assets attract X amount of carbon credits per unit that is measured in accordance with the framework that's involved with that. And I think with that, we can have something that can be easily transacted and traded, but that's yet to be adequately achieved.
Very good. Well, the climate is just one of these horizons issues and tragedies. But another issue, thinking more long term, is the demographic time bomb in Africa as a whole and Zambia in particular. How do you see this playing out?
Now, that's an important point you raise. And, it really speaks to, and this is, I'll say it from two fronts, why the international community must be concerned about this. Of course, we for sure are certainly concerned. I'll give you the Zambian picture. I remember how Zambia was roughly 10 years ago when the population was close to about 12 million people. Today, we're at 20 million people. We've seen the impact of a drought this year is much more severe than it were 10 years ago because of the fact that the number of people who need power is significant. The number, and even the impact of, within the social environment, the urban environment, issues of cholera, issues of access to food and so on, of course, is naturally impacted. Now, because of the growing number, which is very significant, we're adding roughly 1 million Zambians every year. The need for jobs is significant. The need for provision of the basics, food, shelter, clean water, you name it, is very significant. And then there's also an increasing, not only number of youths, but level of frustration also based on the fact that the world is much more interconnected in that people can see how the other world looks like through social media, among other platforms. Technology has proliferated to a point that phones are significantly cheaper. So imagine someone living in a very poor urban area in places like Zambia is able to see how somebody lives in Norway or lives in New York City. So that also enhances the degree of desire, frustration, which creates some degree of anxiety, which again results in upheavals. We've seen that happen in some countries. I don't want to mention because of respect to their own situation, but that is a risk when it comes to social stability. Now, I'll turn that around and say that can also be a phenomenal demographic dividend. It can be utilized for labor, it can be channeled to create value for the world. And this is something we must harness through, of course, structures around capital, provision of certain goods and services that the world truly needs. And speaking of the world, we know that the migration problem that some countries are experiencing, Europe, North America, is really on account of this demographic boom, where there's a shortage of resources for people to essentially utilize for the benefit of a decent life. So hence that migration issue. So we all have an interest in this particular matter to curb migration, to ensure that the problems are solved at source. So this is why the interconnectedness of the global community is extremely important. I see from a Zambia perspective that we are on the right track. In fact, if anything, Zambia is seen as a much more significantly stable country. In fact, we also receive a large number of migrants, economic migrants, because relatively speaking, our country is certainly better off than many others in the region. But I see, because of the policies, because of the trajectory of the mining sector, the economic diversification program, and once we're through with our IMF program, we've resolved our debt situation, our copper production gets to 3 million metric tons. We'll certainly be a platform where we'll be able to manage the population boom. And of course, we also have to be intentional around family planning, around managing the population boom, so that all of that is adequately contained, but of course respecting the values that we have as an African society. Families, people like to have a lot of children and so on. So it's a very difficult conversation to have locally, but it's one that has to be had before it's too late.
Yeah. Well, I think you've highlighted really important issues around the interconnectivity of the system, and that these spillovers from product and labor markets have profound impact on the policy space for Zambia. Maybe turning to a question, by the way, for the audience members, we're in the Q&A part of the discussion, so please feel free to share your questions. But maybe one more issue from me is very much related to this discussion about beyond Bretton Woods. What, in your view, needs to change regarding Bretton Woods institutions now in their 80th year that would very much create this supporting environment that you say that Zambia needs?
I appreciate that. So one is from from a debt sustainability perspective, there's a number of things that need to happen to ensure that, because of course we depend on Bretton Woods institutions, not only for the credibility associated with, say, for example, what an IMF program does in order to restructure debt. That's appreciated. We also recognize that there's a number of safeguards and frameworks we have to work within in order to ensure that we are moving towards this sustainability. But that, creates a high degree of austerity, which obviously makes it very difficult for social intervention, social spending, which does certainly keep the populace happy. And now, so the point I'm driving at in that regard is that we need to have a much more empathetic view on, even though a country is distressed debt-wise, and yes, we have to do everything possible to move towards a situation where you're collecting enough revenues to amortize debt, but we also have to make sure that there's also certain factors, like, for example, the conveying of incentives for new investments to ensure that catalyzes new investments, so that in the long run does derive future value. So I think there has to be an open-mindedness around that. The fiscal policies around, of course, taxation, within a certain fair level, because I know there's often a degree of, I won't say pressure, but countries are urged to get taxes to a certain level so that they can collect a high degree of tax. But I feel like we should work more to broaden tax bases in countries like Zambia. We turn informal markets into formal markets. We have visibility of transactions to remove issues of leakage and so on. Of course, we need a lot of interventions from a seed capital perspective. There are a lot of small businesses that need capitalization. The ideas are there, the solutions to the big problems in society are there. So mine would be really to direct a significant pool of capital towards the private sector through private entities like venture funds, or these venture capital entities which have a strong social element to stimulate local industry that now feeds into anchor investors, anchor sectors where there's significant investment, like in our case, mining. So I think that's an area there where we'd really like to see more interventions, not just on the social side. Yes, we need budget support, that's necessary, but we certainly need an environment where we can get in, at least a high degree of grant capital, but at the same time also affordable, so that we're able to stimulate local economic activities, and that in itself will be a huge contributor to creating a more sustainable environment. And of course, taking advantage of the fact that our natural endowments in places like Africa, like the minerals, like the natural beauty associated with not only tourism, but also with the carbon markets and so on, that's also something that we can truly activate, and we can enhance, either provisions, enhancement of course what's been spoken about in the, I believe it's the Bridgetown Accord, if you will, where we look at affordable capital, high allocations, SDRs, and the like, and also that creates I would say that mitigates issues that are associated with currency volatility and things of that nature. So that's off the top of my head, that's what comes to mind. A combination of flexibility and allocation of more resources, really. And I think that would make a very big difference. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, we've time for one question, which is from Joe Ingram, and great that you could join us today, Joe. To what extent is Zambia's growth strategy prioritizing local value added while using natural resource extraction to move the country up the value chain? And is Zambia still part of China's BRI initiative?
Is BR, maybe I could be assisted with the acronym? What is it? Is it part of the strategic? I need to hear, because I know the various bilateral agreements we've signed, but I need to just be assisted with the full name of the acronym. Yeah.
Well, Frank's coming to the rescue on this one, but perhaps you want to deal with the first part of the question.
Yeah. So basically, I think you mean this Bretton Road. Is that Bretton?
The Bretton Road? Yeah.
Bretton, of course, Bretton Road. Okay, I just never heard it called.
Right.
Yeah, because I'm familiar with the Bretton Road. Excellent. I'll essentially start by saying this. It's a very great question, and really we are looking at three ways in which we can really extract value from our mineral space. One is enhancement of the actual production. We need, because we make a significant earning on mineral royalties, right? That's purely just a top line production tax. Then we also have to look into value addition, because you extract more value from that. So we're creating a framework to ensure that the smeltering capacity, so we're not just selling ore or concentrates, that we're actually down not only to cathode level, but really to the piping and the copper sheets and the cables. So you've got a number of industries that are growing in that particular space in the country, which we're very excited to be a part of. And then thirdly, something that has not been done in 30 years, 40 years in Zambia, and that is the trading. Within the ecosystem of mining, you've got your mining companies, the extraction entities, who make a decent return from that endeavor. Then you've got the next layer. Feel that we need to get involved in that as part of value creation, because the reality is it's very difficult to value add a mineral you don't even have access to. And the fact is, we've come to realize. So I hope this is not screen looks frozen. I hope it's not okay. I hope it's okay now, because it froze on your side, so I wasn't too sure if
we're still good, I think. Oh,
sorry, more interruptions. My apologies for that. Okay, I think we're
okay. Well,
we should go.
Thanks so much. I think you lived up to the rock star billing that Frank gave you at the start. I think you clearly outlined the potential of Zambia, and also triggered, I think, a lot of thinking around how the international environment could be more supportive of that. But that's exactly what BBW is about. So, Frank, I go back to you.
Well, thank you so much. You definitely lived up to the expectations. Thank you both for this really captivating and interesting conversation. I just take away, 1 million growth per year for Zambia, 85%, reliance on hydro. So talking about sustainability and resiliency in the system, the major drought you're faced with. Also the inability in the face of the absence to have a unique global 24/7, 365 carbon price, including for natural capital assets. And so these are all challenges that, you have listed and articulated, and to which the Bretton Woods institutions need to come to terms with. I think, this whole question that we're asking, including to the Bretton Woods institutions, to what extent have they adapted, have they adjusted to these really shifting kind of conditions for countries like Zambia. So with that, I would like to conclude the proceedings. I think we had our fair share of challenges, but it comes with the domain. And I think we maybe have seen a future potential presidential candidate here for Zambia. I think this is definitely, there's a lot of promise here. And so let's keep our fingers crossed. This concludes the second session. We will be shortly announcing third and fourth session coming up in the new year, where we will be reviewing the potential paradigm shifts that will occur in our world. With that, I bid you farewell, and thank you for your patience and your attention, and the best of luck in the new year. Bye for now.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.